And Ms. Swopes, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Mr. Robinson,
Here.
Mr. Elkins,
Here.
Mr. Lopez,
Here.
Ms. Pepper. Here. Ms. Cordova,
Here.
Mr. Rackford,
Here.
Mr. Self,
Here.
and Mr. Merritt.
Here.
All are here.
Thank you. This time, if I'd ask you to please stand and Mayor Pro Tem Cordova will lead us in the invocation and I'll lead us in the pledge. So
Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering us here tonight. Please allow us to have open minds to do business that is pleasing to you. As we enter into this new calendar year, we ask that you provide us with guidance and opportunities to meet and gather with not only our group, but with all of the entities across Portales and Roosevelt County, so that we can do work to glorify your name and move our city and county forward. In this, we pray your holy name. Amen.
amen. Please join me. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of Mexico, with the symbol of perfect friendships among the united cultures.
Welcome, everyone, and Happy New Year. Before we get started, I just want to let everybody know that item 2 under the city manager, request approval of city attorney contract. We are not going to hear that tonight as we're not ready. We haven't completed negotiations on that contract. So with that, our next item for action. Oh, there were no public comment. Is that correct, Chief? Okay. So with that, our first item is minutes of the previous meeting, regular meeting held December 17th, 2024. You'll notice a new format.
I would like to approve the minutes as presented and like to comment on the format. It's very precise and it looks really, really good. Thank you, Daniel. And Melissa, we do like it.
I have to actually forward that compliment to, in part, to our IT person, Christine. She's the one that found the app and suggested that we try it. So,
Well, thank you for the collaboration. Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Ms. Cordova, second by Ms. Parker. If there's no further comments or questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We have a couple of presentations tonight of service awards. And our first one is a 5-year service award. Billy Bustamante. He didn't make it, man. We also have another one. Dan. Yeah. Our second one is a 20-year award. And that goes to Miss Hannah Muslim. I'll try not to throw your anything you want to say?
Thank you. She's not old enough because I remember when she was just a little kid.
Well, never mind. I won't say anything. All right, our next presentation is the Portales Water Study by Wilson and Company and Graham Chapman.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Yes, again, good evening, everyone. My name is Graham Chapman. I'm here representing Wilson and Company, an engineering firm out of Albuquerque. Online with me today, I also have Ezra Clumley. They are with us somewhere online. And we just finished up writing a technical report for the city of Portales regarding the city's water system and the reuse system, and trying to identify anywhere that we could save water in the system. So next slide. Yeah, again, the point of this exercise was to take the water system and give it a full analyze. We made a water model for it using Water Gems of Bentley software, and using that software, we're able to kind of really analyze the whole system and make recommendations for future improvement and look for weaknesses or possible places for water loss. Quick introduction with the data we started using. We started off by just analyzing all the census data for the city of Portales and getting a population curve and a population estimate. Fairly stable population over the years. Slight decrease recently, but very minimal. And then the water supply. All the water for Portales comes from the Ogallala aquifer, and that's shown in this figure here. It's that large aquifer that goes all the way from New Mexico up through Nebraska. Please. We got all of the data from the operators here. We were able to come up with some numbers regarding the water usage, the current water use that Portales uses. That's on that figure here. In 2023, Portales used 801 million gallons of water, and that came out to all sources about 115 gallons per person per day. And then we also looked at how much water was drawn from the wells to provide the city, and that came at 780 million gallons taken out of the Ogallala aquifer that year. If you're looking at those two numbers and realizing that they don't quite add up, the metering data kind of shows that Portales used more water than they took out of the well. And that can be accounted to for all of the meters that we're trying to sum up and equal out. The well field is very large. Does it say up there how many? I think it's up there at like 50 wells, and they all have their own personal meter. And then there's over 6,000 use meters. So the difference between those two numbers, the amount of water used and the amount of water drawn out of the aquifer, really come from just metering error in between the two. It's only a 1.9% error, which is fairly common when you analyze water systems.
Can everybody hear me in
Yes.
meeting? Okay, perfect.
My coworker, they worked on modeling the existing system, so I'm going to let them speak for the next couple slides.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Hi, I'm Ezra Crumley. I worked on this with Graham. I'm actually in Albuquerque right now. I'm sad that I couldn't make it in person. So I'll be presenting online. So in order to model your current system, we worked with your utility department to get the existing data out of their shapefiles from the ArcGIS system, and we uploaded it into a water model program called Water Gems. And using it as well as the data that we have for the pipe sizes, like pipe diameters, as well as the pipe material, we were able to put together this model of your system. It also has meters as well as hydrants for fire hydrants included. And in total, you guys have about 115 miles of water line for your potable system only. Next slide, please. Thank you. So once we had the water model in the system, we also used all of your sorry, we also used all of your demand data. So we had all of the information from your automatically billed meters as well as your manually read ones. So your residential users, like your apartments, your houses, your industrial users, your commercial users, as well as the schools and the co-op were added to the system as meters. And using that as well as the hydrant tests that we received field data from the city of Portales that they had conducted a couple, like about a year ago, I think, we were able to model the pressures that you would see in your system. So as of right now, and it looks like your pressures are between 30 and 55 psi, with your highest pressures in the southeast section of town, and your lowest pressure is all the way down at the airport at that very last hydrant. So that hydrant has a psi of about 30, but your lowest in-town psi is up over on Children's Drive, and that's actually at 40 psi. So this isn't uncommon to see very low pressures at the very end of a system. So this is normal. Um, we also see no major pressure fluctuations in the system. We see lower pressures, as I said, towards the southern part or dead ends where we don't really have that many users pooling water, where higher demands have the higher pressures in them, like around the industrial area and your southwest or southeast quadrant. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then using the hydrant data, we also were able to calibrate the system to make sure that it actually kind of was in, oops. There you go. I'll keep talking. Thank you. We used it to calibrate the system. So using the in-person field tests, we were able to load those into our water model, and make sure that our pressures were in line with what we see in field. And good news, they all do. We also ran a hydrant test to make sure that you guys could get fire flow through your systems, and it was run at 500 gallons per minute at a residential PSI of 20 per the Roosevelt County ordinance. Of all of the hydrants of the 45 that we tested, only one failed, and that was the one in the southern at the airport again, and that is in line with what we see out of the field data. It also failed in the field. So good news, you have fire flow all over your town, which is very impressive. So there are some towns that don't meet that. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, under average demands, the system is working effectively with pressures ranging from 30 psi to 55. Your velocities are less than 5 feet per second as well, which is, I think that the average is around 3 feet per second, which is really good because it means that we don't have as much scouring problems and we're not really worried about your pipes deteriorating from the inside out. You also have less than 80 psi throughout your entire town, which is indicating a low likelihood of pressure-related breaks. You don't need to have any pressure zones or pressure breaks in your line, in your system. It's all pretty evenly balanced out. Also, as mentioned, of the 45 hydrants modeled, only one failed fire flow requirements, and that's due to its location in the at the airport all the way in the south. It's a dead end and there's not really any flow going to it, so it's understandable. Using all of this, your system failures are most likely to occur in locations with older materials or where the water line was installed incorrectly. So you're not really going to most likely see a lot of pressure breaks. You're most likely going to see them along the AC trunk main like you have been, where it's been installed improperly next to the roadway, and in the older DI lines in the city center. Next slide, please. So using all of that, and as well as our system information, we had a couple of recommendations for your existing water. So first one would be to replace the 24-inch trunk main due to improper installation and proximity to the railroad. The trunk main is your main artery in and out or into town. It's moving most of the water throughout. So whenever it breaks, you have a big headache and you also lose quite a lot. So by being next to the railroad and being improperly bedded, it tends to just fracture, according to your utility department and just talks that we've had. So we suggest replacing it as well as putting in more isolation valves to make sure that if there is a break, it's not going to be as much of a problem in the future because you can just isolate it and then fix that one section and loop it back around in another way. We also suggest adding an additional 3 million gallons of storage to the well field. That would be approximately $8 million. Sorry, I forgot to mention earlier, the entire line for the trunk main replacement would be in total around $5 million. The additional 3 million gallon tank in the well field would be about 8 million. This is suggested because your well pumps right now are pumping all the way from the bottom of the well all the way over to your tanks at Johnson Hill. So that's putting a lot of demand on them and causing them to go through more wear and tear than is normally like to be seen with wells. We also suggest that the SDR water lines be replaced because over on the eastern side of your town, SDR PVC isn't a standard that New Mexico APWA accepts for pressure rated systems. In total, that line would be about 1.5 million in cost to repair and replace. And we also suggest doing meter upgrades around your town to convert the manually read ones. You have a couple around, like the ones for the co-op, the ones at UNM, and then some of the schools, as well as a couple of others around the area that are all manually read. So putting them onto an automatic one would allow your utility department to summarize them and have more time instead of having to go outside and read every meter manually. It would just populate in their AMI system like the residential ones already do. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Graham so he can go over your reuse system.
And replacing those meters would also help with that difference, that error that I pointed out at the beginning between drawn out of the aquifer and used in the city. So yeah, the water line was very well designed and maintained. There wasn't very many large red flags that we found with the water line. So then we started looking at the reuse system.
Apologies, you could go to the next slide.
Oh.
This is just for your reference for later on if you print out the PDF and use it again, just so you don't have to remember what I said in person. So thank you.
Thank you, Ezra. Yes, so the reuse system, we started looking at this since your water system is doing very well, and there wasn't a whole lot of very large losses coming from your water system. We started looking at the reuse system to see if we can offset more water use from the aquifer with the reuse system. The wastewater treatment plant right now is designed to treat wastewater all the way to a class 1A reuse standard, which is the highest classification of reuse water besides treating it all the way back to a potable standard. So currently the treatment plant treats it all the way to a reuse standard, and then it is pumped up into the water system that you can see on the screen. It's one large loop that kind of circles the entire city with a fair amount of fire hydrants connected to it. Next slide, please. That's the next slide, or is there? Oh. Okay. So when we were looking at the reuse system, we found that the water is being treated to a high standard, and then it is being stored in a large pond before it is treated through the tertiary standard to the class 1 reuse standard. And it is degrading slightly in the pond, which is making it harder to treat to the class 1A standard. The pumping system is also, in our opinion, undersized. So it is not providing a very strong and reliable source of the reuse water into the reuse system. those two variables combined make the reuse system not as reliable as we'd like to see it, and that is ending in that's causing a drop in reuse users since it is not as available as it can be. So to remedy that situation and get more people using reuse water instead of fresh potable well water, we recommend repiping the wastewater treatment plant the way that it's shown on the screen. Instead of storing it in the pond first and then treating it, letting the water flow right out of the treatment basin and go straight to the reuse treatment process, and then upsize that pumping station with VFD pumps that'll allow you to control the pressure and the flow out of those pumps to meet whatever demand is currently needing. And that will allow you to reliably discharge and produce reuse water to anyone who needs it in the city. And I think that with more reliable source of reuse water, the amount of users will go up, and that'll be less users using the potable water. Another scenario or alternative that we looked into to upgrade the reuse system was to reuse an existing water tower that is in Rotary Park. Right now it's abandoned, but if that were to be rehabilitated and put on the reuse system, that would always be full, and that would provide, with the same pumping system you have now, that would provide temporary storage and all of the availability and the pressure and the flow that you would need to continuously keep the system fully charged. That system. Can we go back a slide real quick? I'm sorry. I also forgot to point out that this improvement would cost approximately $1 million, being just a pumping system rehabilitation and upsize and a new gravity line. And then this system being an entire water tower rehabilitation is slightly more expensive. It comes out to $4.5 million unless the Rotary Park water tower were not to be rehabable and you need a new one. That would put it at $5.5 million. This system, we also modeled that in our water model the same way we did the water system, and using that tank would get you 43 to 54 psi throughout the entire system, with most of those purple reuse hydrants able to supply over 1,000 GPM at each one, which would be more than sufficient for fire flow, especially regarding the Roosevelt County standards. Next slide, please. Another way to third alternative here, another way to help the contamination issue in the large storage pond after wastewater treatment would be to add another tank. This would, adding a tank here, a 1 million gallon tank would hold several days worth of reuse water use in it, and that would keep it from deteriorating in the open air pond, as well as provide more reliability and more just availability with the reuse water, allowing more people to have it when they need it. And this also comes with a upgraded booster station as well. This alternative costs roughly $4 million to get. Next slide, please. So out of all the recommendations that we just made, there are certain priority recommendations, certain recommendations that we suggest you do sooner rather than later. That would be, in the water distribution side, that would be updating the meters and adding tank meters that would reduce the error in the data allow us to analyze the system with a bit more precision, and it would just give everyone, including you guys with the city, more of a look at what the city is doing with the water. There were some users and some like discrepancies besides just the 1.9% error that could also be cleaned up with a whole meter updating program. And then replacing the 24-inch trunk main in the middle of town, we recommend replacing that sooner and prioritizing that upgrade, because when that breaks, you lose a lot of water and it turns off a very large portion of the city. And that's why we prioritize that one over the SDR upgrades. The SDR pipes, according to your utility department, don't currently break. They're not pressure rated pipes, so they may start breaking in the future, but as of right now, they're doing okay. So the 24-inch trunk main is higher priority in our opinion. When it comes to the reuse system, we recommend doing the first alternative, which was just repiping it to go straight to the tertiary treatment first, and then either storing it in the pond or the tank, and then upgrading that pump station to be larger VFD pumps that can produce a variable envelope of pressures and flows.
Okay.
I'm going to let Ezra talk about the conservation efforts. This is more on her end too.
Thank you. So the other thing that we looked at with your town, or the city of Portales, is to just see where you guys kind of were at in terms of water conservation, as well as perhaps where areas you could get a little bit better. So the Water Advisory Board was created, and they hold regular meetings to discuss how everything is going on in the city, which is very good. Plus, your utility department is also adding meters at the Johnson Hill tanks to track the usage in and out. So that way you can make sure that everything is totaling correctly. So check that your well meters are totaling, as well as the town's residential and just total system use. As long as those will help you a lot with your usage in general. As of May 2024, Portales has also been on a stage 2 restriction. Restriction stages are based off of storage levels, not pumping rates. There's some good and bad for that. It means that you can always know how much water you have in storage, but it also doesn't show you the health of your well field, which can cause some difficulties when it comes to total conservation. We also calculated out residential usage by taking your metered residential use by the population on meters, and your city is about 43 gallons per capita per day, as comparison to the United States residential average, which according to the U.S. Geological Survey in 2015 is 82 gallons per day, and according to UNM, the New Mexican average is 77 gallons per capita per day. So you're about over 20 gallons less than the New Mexico average, which is very good to see. There also are some outliers in your system, with a small number of residential users exceeding over 5,000 gallons a day. We don't know who they are or why, but it's recommended that you go through a tiered rate structure or reclassify the end user if they are in fact not residential, and continue meter testing and replacement program. So your utilities department already does a really good job of checking and making sure that meters are operating as they should, which is nice to see. But it really is helpful to see kind of who in your system is using large pools of water and making sure that they're classified correctly and billed correctly. In addition, there has also been a decrease in water usage in all categories. So your residential, like your apartments, your homes, your commercial users, UNM, Portales schools, all of them have had a decrease in water usage, except for the commercial and industrial end users, from the 2022 data to your 2023 data. So this indicates to us that your outreach programs that were implemented have been effective, especially for residential users. They've really been doing their part in making sure that they cut down on water usage. And across the board since 1995, all categories have decreased water usage, which is also really great to see since you've started tracking your data. So we suggest that the water conservation contingency plan also be made more robust to kind of help balance things out. Your tanks are a really good indicator of your water stored up over at Johnson Hill, but not your well field health or your actual water usage that's coming in and out. We suggest that you draft new restriction levels based off of aquifer water levels. So from your well information, as well as metered production and consumption to allow for more accurate measurement of current and future water supply and not just relying on the tank levels, because it's a good thing to have a strong amount of storage, but if the wells aren't very healthy, then you're not really sure how much time you have with that stored amount. And then back to Graham for the rest of the presentation.
So with again, with the quality of the water distribution, the biggest way to save water coming out of the Ogallala aquifer and the biggest way to save water is going to be expanding the reuse water. Out of the 580 million gallons of Class 1A reuse that is produced in 2023, only 22 million of it, about 4%, was actually utilized in irrigation or fire suppression or construction or any of the other uses that it can be used for. Moving more of the football fields and the cemetery and the other irrigatable places in Portales to the system would account for another 11.7 million gallons of reused water. That would increase it up to a total of around 6 to 7% of the total amount of reuse produced. With the existing reuse is limited by a lack of routine application for it. You can produce as much reuse as you can, but you can't, if you don't have the usage for it, then it will end up getting discharged into the playa, the city-owned playa. That being said, ongoing conversations with the Office of the State Engineer and the New Mexico Department of Environmental Department, we've been talking with them to see if there are any other options for the rest of the reuse water and if there's any more ways we can utilize that more efficiently. That is where the idea of indirect potable reuse comes in. Currently, right now, Rio Rancho is the only city in New Mexico to have a functioning indirect potable reuse system, which is where the water is already treated to a Class 1H standard, which is what I said earlier is the highest quality of reuse water that is available at the moment before you treat farther into potable water standard. The technology is available to treat the Class 1A reuse water all the way back to a potable standard and then re-inject it into the aquifer for future storage. You can see the diagram up on the screen is kind of a simple diagram of how the wastewater treatment plant would look like. You could take the storage pond offline completely. There would be no more need for above ground storage, except for a storage tank to store any of the reuse water that is going to be used for reuse only, which would be that 22 million a year that we showed in a couple slides before. You could store that in there, not a 22 million gallon tank, but a smaller tank that you could store for people to use and irrigate with that water. And then the rest of it, anything that overflows that tank could be treated with an advanced treatment process and then be put back into the aquifer to be picked up by the well field in a couple years from the injection point. That would reinforce the aquifer and it would add a lot of storage to the aquifer itself and recharge it and up the health of the aquifer. You guys, I know you've been doing a lot of community outreach regarding the water. We are using a lot less water per person as the Portales citizens. It seems like the outreach has been working. And a personal use of 43 gallons per person per day is a pretty impressive number of usage. So, you know, there's always the possibility of increasing public education, but what you guys have been doing has been working. Next one. All right, and then just is a big report and there's a lot in it, so we tried to summarize it in a way where we got all of the important details. But here's a final report. Yeah, okay. Oh. Okay. You know, we're on the Ogallala Aquifer. It is depleting. It is a problem that we are very aware of. But with a combination of outreach and advanced treatment options and using more reuse water, I believe that a lot of stress can be taken off of the Ogallala Aquifer, and I believe that plus I know the Ute pipeline is coming in. Those two things combined should be able to provide plenty of potable water for Portales. So that being said, yeah, any questions? I'm sure there's already a hand up in there.
Yes. Yeah, I would like to start with one that you brought up right toward the end. And I mean, it sounds great to re-inject the water back into the aquifer, but we're a very small community that's using water out of that aquifer.
Mhm.
We've got Texas pulling out bukus more than we're using. So that kind of things for spending that kind of money to put it back in for Lubbock to pull out just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So can you explain to me how that's going to help Portales and not just the people who are pulling out way more water than we are?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid question. Water in the aquifer does move quite slowly. So some of the water you inject will probably end up in Texas, but if you and then part of the research part of designing all of that advanced treatment does come a very in-depth geological survey where they map out the gradients of in the direction that the Ogallala water is moving. So there would be a way for you to, in theory, inject the water in a place where it'll pass straight through the well field. And yeah, water in aquifers does move very slowly. So if it doesn't get picked up by you in the well field, it may move to Texas, but it should directly impact you first before
You're passing it right by it. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Of course.
Anything else?
So you talked a lot about the pressure differential between parts of town and then out towards the airport. We don't have pump stations. Everything is elevation pressure.
Yeah.
So the reason that the airport out there is the least amount of pressure is because it's at 44,050 feet elevation. Portales is around 4,000, and our tanks are at about 4,100. So we just got a 50-foot of the pressure differential there between the tanks and the airport. And the town is sitting at 4,000, so that's where most of the pressures will be because of that. And in your talk about the wastewater treatment plant, the pipeline that's going around there is supplying the reuse water to the hydrants. Did you guys pressure test hydrants on the north end of town?
We have not, because we were under understanding that with the current pumping infrastructure that's there, that testing it was not available at the time. So
So in your observations out at the treatment plant, what was the pressure on the line that you were pumping from the pump house?
we didn't look at the pressure coming out of the pump house. I know that the utility department knows what it is. I think it's in the, I'm not sure off the top of my head. We were mostly looking at the treatment, and we know just based off of what the utility department has told us is that the pumping station is a little on the undersized part.
Because we took a tour out there some time ago. And I'm thinking that the pressures coming off of that pump was somewhere between 80 and 90 PSI. Right?
Okay, so it sounds like the pumping station has enough pressure, but I don't think the pumps were properly sized flow wise. So they may be producing the pressure, but they may not be producing the volume of flow needed, especially in the northern area. Because
There's-
according to the when they were doing pressure or flow testing, the hydrants on the northern side of town they had pressure, but they didn't have adequate flow out of them. Those two
Yeah,
were
Chris also had a comment on that.
oh yeah.
Mhm.
This is Chris. He's my supervisor with Wilson and Company.
Yeah, Mayor, City Council, thank you for having us here today. My name's Chris Bradley. I'm the practice lead for water and wastewater for Albuquerque office. And I'm not sure which councilman was asking the question there, but the reuse system is not currently it doesn't have stored or elevated storage within the system. It's purely an on-demand pumped system. So really the pressures and the flow rates of the fire hydrants, those purple hydrants, are really dependent on the pumping system at the reuse pond. So the ability to pressure test those and really test those, it's a weakness. And one of the reasons that we had the alternative we did was to provide elevated storage and on-demand pressure and capacity within the reuse system. So I think the shortfall with the reuse system right now, the primary shortfall is first that you don't have a sufficient demand on it or a dependable demand on it, and that there's no storage on that system. So if we could introduce the ability to store some of that treated water at an elevated level, or at least have on-demand pumps that would be able to pump from a storage, you'd be able to provide more of that water when the need arises. But that, I think your question definitely does get to that point that I think we also found out. So I appreciate the question for sure. And thank you for having us.
That points out another bottleneck too, with the pumps pulling straight from the tertiary treatment process. If you were to open a fire hydrant and let that flow, you may get adequate flow out of it for a short time. But I think it's 2 hours is the standard amount of time that you want that higher level flow, and you're not going to get that without the storage behind it. If the tertiary treatment process cannot keep up with the pumps, you're going to get some decapitation. So I
Well,
hope that answers your question.
it does, and it's something that that I've seen, and then some others also during our tours of the system. In my view, this was a poorly designed system. It was not completed the way it should have been. And if they would have, instead of closing the circle around Portales and having one input into it, if they would have brought that line back down and went back into the pond to have a continuous circulating system instead of a closed system that's pressurized, then it would solve a lot of the issues. But you've got one pipeline coming off of your reuse pond, pressurizing that whole system. And the loop around it, it's staged probably correctly percentage wise on the pipe size. But a 4-inch pipeline on the north end is not going to supply enough water to get you what you need. So everything should have been upsized, in my opinion, from the start.
I agree with you on that. I guess I'll try to start from the beginning of your presentation and kind of
Okay.
talk on the potable water side. You made a comment that the water system is effective. I think you're referring to the losses.
Mhm.
So are you saying that we have 0 water losses on our system, or is that just a true metering fault that we won't know what the losses are with our current system? Do you know?
So
Um,
you'll never have a system that has 0 losses. That's fair. We're not saying that your system is always 0. The problem that we were having when we were totaling your values is that it looked like you were using more water than your wells were producing, which is physically impossible. So that's kind of the error that we're saying, that 1.9% error. And it's most likely just due to the, you have over, I think, like over 2,000 meters or something in your residential usage and just around town. And when you compound all of that, you're going to have meter errors on top of it, along with your wells, which also have meter errors of their own. So your system definitely has losses. It's just that right now trying to pin down where those are, and how much is kind of a shortfall in your system right now, just
and
because
we
you don't
can
have the
say,
totalizer.
since the amount of error is in the positive direction of like that 1.9% more water, that does suggest that your losses are low. Because if all the error was to be accounted for, it doesn't drag it, back into negative. So we can't quantify it exactly with the way the meters are currently, but it does suggest that it is low, because some towns and cities in the same size in New Mexico look at losses ranging up into like the 20% loss. So.
And so are there mechanical meters at the wellheads? Is that how y'all were able to determine the?
Yeah,
We-
each wellhead has a
Production of
meter on it, and then those
Right.
meters, all of that data is supplied to NMED.
Okay.
But there is nowhere in the system is there one master meter that totals everything coming out of the well field or everything leaving the.
So that's
the
why you
Johnson
needed the
tank.
storage tank.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
you will now have a totalizing meter by adding that one at the Johnson Hills tank. So that will help you a lot with tracking.
We've been
Losses and
talking to the
everything.
utility department about that, and they are installing one right at the trunk at the tank.
Where it comes out.
Yeah, so that will allow us to actually in the next year calculate exactly what the losses in the system are and have a better idea of what's coming in and out.
Okay.
So that one will count as like a master meter of sorts.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay. And then moving into the reuse system, and really it's on the wastewater treatment plant. The water that is being discharged to the playa, is that already treated to 1A status and then sent to the playa, or is it sent to the playa before we're even treating it with the chlorine?
It is treated to class 1A before being sent to the playa.
Okay. And then in your report, I don't know how much you touched on it on the presentation, but in the detailed report, you essentially said that our playa is useless because it's not going through the wet dry cycle. So I think in the report, it said somewhere in the range of 90 to 95% is evaporated. So do you not think anything in that playa is getting pushed back into the aquifer just in a slow recharge?
Some of it definitely is, but without that wet and dry cycle, a large majority of it is getting evaporated.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm of the opinion that IPR is the way to go. But I just think that it would be great if we can utilize that playa in any way. But my next question was related to the IPR. Do y'all know costs on the indirect
side of that? I mean, what could we even expect to spend if we wanted to look that route and follow Rio Rancho? Is there data on that?
I'm sure there's data for what it costs Rio Rancho to use. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head, and they would be a lot lower for here being a smaller community. But it is slightly higher on the price tag. That is advanced technology that you'd be installing. It'd be like activated carbon filters and ozone generators and stuff of that nature that you'd be adding. So it is expensive.
Do you think, I mean, is 1 million expensive, or are we talking like 20 to $50 million expensive?
Chris has a.
Chris.
Oh, Chris.
Thank you. I'd just like to jump in. So as part of the scope of the project, we didn't get into the estimate of the indirect potable reuse option. It is an option that's open to you. It is going to be significantly expensive, as well as it's a large hurdle to overcome. We have had some brief discussions, some initial discussions with New Mexico Environment Department, I think the Office of the State Engineer as well, and just they're open to it, but there really hasn't been a fully demonstrated success yet. Rio Rancho's been going at it for a number of years, and there may be some shortcuts or some ways to approach it, but you've got a lot of hurdles. And public perception, I think, is one of those that you need to consider. People generally, like a degree of separation between wastewater and drinking water that is really hard to overcome. So we didn't dive into that really deeply, but it is a potential. I don't know that option is really going to be successful within the short time frame that we have for the Ute Mountain or the Utah pipeline to be completed. So just a quick answer. I think it's definitely something as an option, but we did not get into it in significant depth to be able to make a statement on it. So, but I appreciate the question. You're right on with your questions. You are definitely understanding the situation and saying a lot of the things that we also thought here. So I appreciate that.
I wish that we could increase the reuse applications, and like you had said in your report, I think you could increase it by like 11 million gallons, but out of the 580 that was produced, that's a tough thing to overcome.
That 11 million was us finding all of the possible places that we could find, like currently all of the fields and golf courses but MED is open to trying the indirect potable reuse. So it is and that's kind of as far as we researched it for this report, for this to fill the requirements of this report, was just to kind of identify it, talk to NMED, talk to the Office of the State Engineer, and say, before we put this in the report to pursue more later, like, is this something that we'd be able to do? And they said yes, it's something we would work with you on. So yeah, as far as we'd have to get a little bit farther in design to give you a solid number.
And I assume that they would prefer the indirect versus the direct, just giving it that time to recharge.
They would prefer indirect. New Mexico currently does not have any potable direct reuse standards. However, NMED is planning on coming out with some of those in 25, 26. So that could also be a potential. That would also address your concern about sending all of your water to Texas. Direct potable, it would absolutely all stay here.
Right.
But that would be an extra hurdle, again, because of what Chris was saying, the
Public perception.
Yeah. And it would have I think it has a slightly more stringent regulations when
I'm sure.
out. So
And one of the things that people in the community may think about, and if we could put some of that water on the parks, we'd use more of it. But that's true, but it's not really gonna help. Other than keeping the water moving, I can't see that's gonna make a large dent either. I'd love to see our parks green. That's the benefit of getting our parks piped and watered.
Yeah. And
But it's not gonna make a big dent in that 580 million.
No, that's what that 11 million figure was. It was, we went and we looked at all of the different irrigation applications throughout Portales and assumed if you put all of those on the school and the parks and the golf course and all of that, we came up with an estimate of about 11 million.
Oh, that's with the parks.
Yeah, that's
Okay, because parks
11
wasn't
million
listed anywhere.
added to the, I think, 22 million, so that would be the 33 million total is with all the parks and the schools and the cemeteries and the golf course and everywhere that has green grass being irrigated with reuse water would only be at, 33 million or 6%.
6 to 7%.
I got Rustin next, okay?
I'm kind of stuck on the 1A affluent. Did you or anybody from your team actually test the water out there at the wastewater?
We didn't, but we do know that there are some issues with the treatment plant at the current moment. We do have all of the NMED permitting documents with that. And we're actually currently working on a corrective action plan to fix, there's a couple issues with the wastewater treatment plant. And we're currently writing a corrective action plan to address those.
So I think it's fair to say it's not 1A quality affluent, right?
It is close, but it is not actually reaching it right now, no.
Okay,
It
so
is more in theory supposed to be class 1A, and the treatment process is designed to take it to 1A. Which is more of what we were saying with it being treated as class 1A, is it's supposed to be class 1A.
Chris has another comment.
If I could jump in real quick. So, is that Councilman Self?
yes.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So Wilson and Company, under the scope of the water conservation report, we were really focused on the water and the reuse system, not necessarily the treatment piece in the middle of that. However, we are under contract currently to help you with a corrective action plan on the wastewater treatment plant. So we may be blending our presentation into what we know about the wastewater treatment plant as well. So there are a number of things with the wastewater treatment plant that are areas for correction or improvement in the operation of the plant. So we appreciate your question, but yeah, the water conservation report really focused on from the reuse pumping on into the reuse system and from the water distribution side. So I guess more to follow is the best way I can put that.
Well, and
I see where you're getting at. We're saying it's class 1A in the report, and it's not really class 1A, but what the report is aiming at is that the technology is all there to treat it to class 1A, and it is a class 1A treatment plant. It's got the issues that's not quite getting it there right now, but it is a class 1A treatment plant.
sure, understand that. Just the reason there's not a lot of usage, the 4% usage, people don't want to use it because it's nowhere close to 1A affluent. It stinks. You don't have enough circulation in the system.
Mhm.
The schools don't want to use it. I know there's bottlenecks and
Yeah.
multitude of problems, but yeah,
It's a catch-22 type problem, right? You have a buildup of storage at the treatment plant because no one wants to use it, and then that gets contaminated in that big pond. And then it's not class 1A anymore, so then no one wants to use it even more. So then you store more of it, and it's a catch-22 problem that we are working
okay,
in that corrective action plan.
okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Quick question. Did you guys consider, because in your report, you listed a part of the problem with the big open storage tank. It's the fact that you're getting an algae buildup out there in the tank, and that you're leaching out the chlorination that is going into that water to try to clean it up. So have you considered the big balls? I mean, we've talked about it around here between us, and that would cut down on the evaporation, cut down on the sunlight going into that water and creating that algae, and so you wouldn't have as much of that to try to clean up with it.
That's true.
And
Can I
the size of that pond and the cost of the treatment balls, you'd be looking at between 850 and $1 million
Mhm.
for the balls go on.
We did look at those a bit. They would help if the pond was clean, but if without cleaning the pond first, the balls would actually give the algae something to grow onto, and they may make the problem worse in the short term. In the long term, if we do implement some way to chlorinate the water first before the pond, and clean the pond and reset the pond, then the shade balls may help, but adding the shade balls by themselves would possibly make it worse in the short term, if that's the only solution we're
If I can also add, because you are in a plain setting, they are very lightweight, so it is a very real possibility that they could blow off of it. Unless you have another containment system for it on top, which would then make maintenance a little bit harder to actually get in and clean out the sludge. So they are very real and they are a possibility, but there are some other issues with them just because of wind and your current system's algae bloom issues, and also maintenance of cleaning the sludge.
They are weighted.
Yes, but you could still blow them
Right.
away. I understand that they're
Just because
weighted.
LA has a huge pond out there that they use, clean water that they use. They're lined with those shade balls. And they get winds from the coast, so.
Okay, got some questions, but otherwise let's try to wrap this up real quick. There's questions.
One question I did have in one of your appendixes, it did say that in the permitting of the reuse, the golf course was already included in the permitting for it, I believe. And so all it would take was upgrades to get it to the golf course. So that is positive. We were worried about the permitting issue. That is apparently not an issue from their report. So that is a good thing.
Okay. I really appreciate the report. I appreciate the questions, and we look forward to some continued work with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you guys for having us.
Thank all of
yeah,
you.
thanks for having me. Thanks for working with me, letting us do this work with you. We're enjoying it as well. So thank you.
We'll keep. Good question, guys. Thanks. Next item is a discussion item, procurement of a public utility. We have Mr. Paul Kuipert, an attorney with the New Mexico Self-Insurers Fund. Paul, are you there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for having me. First of all, I want to apologize. I don't have a camera, so it's just my voice. And yeah, I was asked to look into the sale of a public utility, sale or lease, and I'm not sure which way you guys are going. So I put
Hold on, Paul, for
together
just a minute.
12 pages.
Oh, we're really having a hard time hearing you real
Oh,
well.
I'm sorry. Is this any better? I'm pretty close to my screen.
That's a little better, yeah.
All right. So I was asked to look into what it would take to sell or lease a public utility.
Right.
And that's where the 12 pages comes from that you should all have. I'm not going to go over all 12 pages. That would be boring for all of us. But I have a few points I wanted to make. First of all, keep in mind what you're actually leasing or selling. Is it the system? Is it, the services? Just what exactly is it that you're leasing or selling? And make sure it's not the water rights themselves. You would never, as a municipality, want to get rid of the water rights. My pages have a lot of questions and issues that really need to be considered before you move forward with a lease or a sale. To know, you'd want to have a working group go through all that. Now, I think Wilson Company just gave a very good report and maybe answered some of those questions, but there's still a lot of questions outstanding before you would move forward with either a procurement or a negotiation of a sale or lease. And the gist of the questions that are on those pages can be summed up in two things. what are the current problems or issues with the system that you're trying to fix? Which I think Wilson and Company just discussed a lot of those. And then secondly, would privatizing the system fix these problems or exacerbate them? And that's a really important question to answer. As you see from the pages, there's several statutes that are involved in this. I've highlighted some of the key language in the first one. And but there are other statutes that are involved, depending if you're franchising, leasing, selling, whatever. And if you were to do an RFP for this, it would be a really complex RFP, as you can see from the questions on the pages. And I would advise, as someone who's been involved with really complex procurements, that you would hire consultants on this to help you make sure that everything in the contract, first of all, the RFP and then the contract, you have everything in there you need to have in there to cover yourselves. Specifically, buyback provisions are outlined in the pages. Pretty much everything that I mentioned that the working group should look at and that the RFP should have, most all of that should be reduced to the contract if, the eventual contract, whether you do it through an RFP or you do it through a negotiated sale or what have you. So I think that's key, is to look at all of those things and make sure they're reduced to the contract. Those are the major points I wanted to make. As I say, you can look at the 12 pages. Hopefully you have, and if you have any questions, I'm more than willing to try to answer them.
I've got a couple of questions. Your buddies.
Go ahead.
Okay, Paul, in this first part, you talk about the sale or lease of property, and then if that were the case, that also has to be approved by the Board of Finance. Is that not correct?
Yes. So the Board of Finance has a statute, which I have in the papers later, that says sale or lease of any public property needs to be approved by the board. So I would definitely suggest you contact the board and very complex for submitting.
So Paul, would that just be in order for them to be paid back for any grants that we received from them to make sure that they were made whole?
No, they have to approve, according to their statute, if you look at it, they have to approve the sale or lease of any public property by state or local public bodies.
Board of Finance.
Briefly, hospital district I do work for, we built a pharmacy. Originally, we're going to lease it to a pharmacist, and then he decided he wanted to buy it. It was about a year process just getting through the Board of Finance. And I mean, there was no paybacks or anything, just, the qualified appraisal that he talks about here, the number B. And the Board of Finance sent us back with the attorneys about 4 times. And that would, to me, that was pretty simple process.
So is it more common for them to not approve it than it is for them to approve the sale of a utility?
I don't know the answer to that, whether it's common or not. What is common, though, is, as the mayor pointed out, they will have you submit the paperwork, and then it won't be right, or they'll want more or whatever. And I'm not saying that, I used to work for DFA, so I'm not saying that to insult the Board of Finance, but they have very particular requirements that you'd have to meet. And it sometimes takes time to meet those. And they meet, I think once a month, except in the summer, they have a month off, something like that. So,
So we
yeah,
just have
that's
to
a
follow their
complicated process.
procedures. And then it does say in here, in section B, if the sale price is less than the appraised value, the governing body shall cause a detailed written explanation that the difference to be prepared. And the written explanation shall be made available to the interested party. So we could give it away. We just have to have a written justification for it. That's what this says.
Right.
Well, I would
Didn't gonna let that-
caution you on that. The Board of Finance actually has a rule that they won't allow the sale of public property for less than the appraised value.
Even though they have it in this statute?
Yes, because the statute says that the appraisal, even though it says, a detailed written explanation, if you're going to have a detailed written explanation that says the appraisal was $1 million and you're selling it for $1, they're not going to approve that. And they're going to, everybody's going to wonder why you would do that. And it gets back to public perception, as the gentleman mentioned earlier, on a different context. But yeah, they do have that rule in the Board of Finance rules.
But how did the city of Clovis do it?
They didn't.
Epcor took over at some point. How did they do?
Excel's had it forever and ever, and then gave it to, or sold it to
That-
American, or New Mexico American Water Company. And then New Mexico New Mexico American Water Company sold it.
It was never, Clovis was never a municipality.
So anything that we can find, even talking to Julie with her granddad and her uncle with mayors, the city did not own the.
And Texaco's just going through like a management contract with Epcor. Is that what they're doing?
I don't know what they're.
At least to bring this.
So they're going through, they have to be going through the Board of Finance as well.
Should be, I mean, if that's what's going on, so.
Yeah, I don't think a management contract would need to go through the board, only a sale or lease. You could do a management contract basically through an RFP.
Okay.
Any other questions for Paul at this time? Paul, thanks for your time.
Sure,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. Let me know if there's anything.
We may
else.
have more questions, and I think we know where to get a hold of you if we do.
Yes, absolutely. That'd be fine.
All right. Thanks for your time, Paul. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you all. Bye.
Okay, that now brings us to our action items. The first item is a public hearing for approval of application for BW Gas and Convenience Retail LLC DBA Allsup's number 102046 for transfer of ownership and location of liquor license application number BLA 0000001599. I would now take a motion to enter into a public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Robinson, a second by Ms. Parker. All in favor signify by saying aye. Okay. Open the public hearing by asking if there is anyone in the audience in support of this transfer. Seeing none, is there anyone in this? I'm sorry?
My name is Gary Guest. I'm legal counsel for BW Gas Convenience Retail. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have for the transfer.
Okay, thank you. Again, anybody in support? Is there anyone in the audience in opposition? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Parker, a second by Mr. Lopez. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Next item is action by council on application for the transfer of ownership and location of liquor license for Allsup's number 102046. Sir, sorry, you can't see your name, but would you mind advising the council as to exactly where how this transfer is transpiring and where the liquor license is coming from?
Are you speaking to me, sir?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes,
Here.
sir. Yes, sir. We are purchasing this liquor license from Doghouse Pack. They have procured another license that's already come before the council, and y'all approved that a couple weeks ago or a month ago. We are moving the license that is currently at this location to another new store that'll be opening very soon. And so this license will replace the license that we have. Doghouse Pack sold us this license and they bought another license to replace their license. So there's 3 licenses involved in all this motion to get us where we need to be.
Is that new location in Portales?
What's that?
Is that new location in Portales?
No, sir.
So it's moving out of Portales.
The current license that's at the location, yes.
There's certain licenses that can't be moved and certain licenses that can be moved.
Correct. The one that we have currently at Portales is a retailer's license. So we can move it where we need to be, where it needs to be moved. So we bought a local license from Doghouse Pack to protect our package sales. And that's the one we'll be moving in and staying there at that location.
Any further questions? We do these quite regularly, but just want to make sure everybody knew what was going on here.
This particular license is leaving.
It's going across the street and going across. The street.
The one that also currently has at that location is leaving because it's one of those kind of license they can move around the state. They're replacing it with the license they got from the dog. And I think Chad probably got a different kind of license to continue to operate the way he's going to operate.
That is correct.
So,
Yeah, so we had 2 licenses and now we're still gonna have 2 licenses. It's just gonna be 2 different licenses. Is that
pretty
my
much.
understanding?
Yes. So there's no further questions. What's the pleasure of the council?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rackler, a second by Mr. Elkins. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, have one opposition, Mr. Merrick. Okay. But the motion passes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gaston.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Next goes community service, a request approval of the easement application for 1125 South Boulder submitted by new owners John and Don Boone. Ms. McClellan.
So thank you, Mayor, Council. So this is a pretty straightforward easement request. This property has been owned by only 2 property owners. The original property owner got permission to have this structure that's highlighted there in 1988. They're selling it, so the new owners just need permission to keep the structure that's in that picture there. It's an encroachment of 14.1 feet into that section of land owned by the city. We haven't had any problems with this area, so staff had no opposition to this easement being granted. They're out of state, so they weren't able to be here today, but I believe I saw the real estate agent on Zoom. If you guys had any questions that I can answer for you guys.
Questions for Ms. McClellan?
Original owner of Bailey's, is that correct? The original.
I believe so. Don't quote me on it.
To make sure it's the right property.
I got a question. I was thinking this property right here is the owner owns it there where it's at.
No, so if you see that thick black line, that's where their property line ends.
Well, I understand that, but so it's a city's.
Yes, so technically that building is built on city property. But we'd allowed the build with the previous owners.
So we're going to give it to them?
No, this would just be an easement. It's saying we're allowing them to have that there, but they don't have any ownership of that land.
Okay, thank you.
It's a very small corner.
And so they will have to they'll still have to maintain that. corner.
Still have to maintain it, all that, which is, a good thing for the city.
Why do we want that corner? Just asking.
That is just part of ours in the plat. So it's just always been owned by the city since pre-1988.
We don't use it. Too small to build it.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd think you could just give that to whatever lot that is and move on, so we don't have to do it again.
Well, the only long range possibility from a planning zoning perspective would be if you needed to widen the street or make that curve bigger around that corner.
Yeah.
that would be the only reason, probably the reason it was set aside in the first place, because that's a very sharp curve coming around back the other way. So they might at some point want to widen the street, but it won't get near that yellow building.
Plus the anti-donation clause.
Right.
But it'd be under 25,000, so we wouldn't have to go. Any more questions for Ms. McClellan on this particular issue? If not, what's the pleasure of the council?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Elkins, second by Mr. Lopez. There's no further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
I'm gonna abstain because one of us two was part of that sale, so.
So if you would show Mr. Merrick abstaining. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed, same sign. And one abstention. Okay. Next item is request approval for the intent to adopt amendment to ordinance number 494, Article 3, signs. The amendment is for the clarification of permitted signage allowed by the municipality, unanimously approved by the Planning Commission at their last regular meeting held December 9th, 2024.
Thank you, Mayor Council. So we started seeing an uptick in billboard requests. And I believe even at council, even some people who have requested this said our ordinance is outdated and needs some clarification. So we were also asked by a city council member to work on that clarification. So today we're asking for the intent to adopt. My recommendation is to approve the intent. And then during the public hearing, if you want to make any amendments to this billboard, that's ordinance, that's when we could do it, but it would at least get this open to make this updated changes. This did go to planning and zoning, and they recommended what we're going to discuss right now as being accepted as is. So what we did do to this ordinance is we added definition of a billboard. It's very old ordinance, we didn't have it in the old one. We specified signs, sizes, and locations, stricter maintenance clauses, and then no exceptions of off-premises advertising or signage. And removed the permitting for off-premises signs, and then removed the exceptions, special permits for off-premises advertising signage. So pretty much what it did was take it from a 95% anti-billboard ordinance to 100% anti-billboard ordinance. So if you agree with it or not, I still recommend putting it through so at least we can work on the ordinance and get it updated, which would be done not now, but when we bring it back for a public hearing. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And the process would be you have to publish all of these.
Correct.
So that the public will know what we're doing and can participate in the next process.
Bring it back, there'll be a public
And then
hearing
you
if
can-
they're.
Approve, deny, or amend.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor, friendly.
Yes, sir.
I just want to be clear about off premise. We're talking about if you put a sign up that's not on your property for your business signage. Because some of those that have come before us, they're selling the sign space to businesses that aren't on that property.
Correct. So
That's what you're talking about eliminating
Yeah, so it would say if you have a sign on your property, it must be for your business.
for your business. So make sure I understood. Then everybody's.
So then I have a question. What about the businesses that have already have a contract in place? Are they gonna be grandfathered in?
Yeah, if they've already been approved, we won't look backwards. They're good to go.
Okay, to follow up to that question. So when that contract expires, then they can't renew with somebody else. If they've grandfathered in, and would that be the case?
That would be probably a good recommendation to add into our current, because I do believe we have 3 or 4 billboards in town. Maybe to add a section saying, if you're already there, yes, you can. You can't build a new one, but you can renew a lease on a current standing one.
Yeah, let them use their
So-
signage. They spend $1 million putting them up.
I've got issues with this. If I'm a restaurant in town, I want to get my name out there so that somebody's seeing this before they get to my restaurant. And why is this an issue? I don't understand why advertising off premises is an issue for the city of Dallas.
Well, it's because currently our ordinance is a 95 anti-billboard. It's currently banned. They have to go through variances and special use to come here. So the recommendation is to clean this up. If the council wants us to be more billboard friendly, to write an ordinance that's going to reflect that. If they want us to remain anti-billboard friendly, to update our current one to reflect that. So my recommendation would still be to move forward with the intent, just so we can change it to what you guys would like to see in the future.
So if you would like to do that, we adopt this intent, and then you could amend that in. Or amend out the language you don't like.
Well, I mean, you can keep your stringent rulings on the type of billboards that you're allowing. But I don't understand the purpose of not allowing off-premise signs.
A local business.
I mean, if you want to keep them from just being an eyesore, then limit the size of them, limit where they can be. But don't say that it can't be for a business that's not
300
at
feet.
that location.
That's currently what's in our current ordinance, so that is something we can open it up, and those can be recommendations to amend our current ordinance to be more friendly to.
Another thing that you can look at too is when you're coming into town, most people are probably gonna Google where they're gonna go anyway, so the size of the billboard is gonna be what's gonna be the eyesore.
Again, this is just an intent. We're not approving or disapproving anything at this point. Just moving. Jake?
If you want to put a sign, if it's in your property, you can do it then too.
So our current ordinance says it has to be within 300 feet of the business's advertising.
If we're approving it, if it's in the city property, that's why we're doing it here, right?
We're just, we're opening it up to see, our current one is anti-billboard. So we rather need to make it more anti-billboard and update it, or if we want it to be pro-billboard, look at the new one. So that would be up to the citizens and city council on how they'd like that new ordinance to go, or the amended the ordinance to go.
Either way, we have to amend our ordinance to allow or disallow.
Should we include a city hall on this or a town meeting on this one or?
Well, we have a public hearing.
Just the public hearing at one of our meetings.
And we have to publish this, so many days. If you adopt this intent. Any more questions for Kelly? If so, what's the pleasure of the council on this intent to amend the ordinance number 494, Article 3?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Robinson, a second by Ms. Cordova. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have two noes.
Yes.
Okay, two noes, Mr. Lopez and Mr. Merrick. So we'll move forward with the intent. All right, we're moving on to the city manager. Mr. Moyer, first item is request approval of an intent to adopt amendment addition to ordinance number 760, City of Portales Personnel Policy adopted July 5th, 2022, City Attorney Edition, and Section 8 Compensation and Benefits.
It's actually written wrong. It's because we did the intent to adopt on the last council
Well,
meeting.
it should be advertised as a public hearing then.
Correct, so we probably should.
So do we need to probably,
Table it.
will we have to re-advertise for the public hearing?
It was advertised,
But
but we should probably redo it.
postpone it?
Postpone it until next meeting.
Okay, because it
That's
should be
fine.
under, I thought we had already done this, and when I read that, I thought, okay,
I didn't catch that.
well, then that concludes our,
Do we need to make a table, a motion to table it?
will, just a motion to postpone. What about that one?
I make a motion, we postpone item 1 on city manager request for amendment
Till the next meeting.
till the next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Cordova, second by Mr. Rackler. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That moves us to city council and staff comments. I'll begin with the staff. I'll start with Chief Williams. Chief Kathy. Liliana. Ms. McClellan. Our new 20-year employee. It's not old enough to be 20 years here. Clerks. Mr. Moyer.
I have a bunch of things. First, legislative dinner February 10th in Santa Fe. I'll need names and everything of people that are going so that we can make the reservations and put our names in. And then if you haven't checked, the chamber banquet is this Friday. The city has 2 tables. So if anybody that hasn't answered me is wanting to go, just get with me and I'll put you on the list. Legislative coffee tomorrow, 8:30 to 10:30 at the Yam with the legislators. All the quorum notices for the chamber banquet and the coffee tomorrow are posted. 13th of January, so Monday at 4 p.m. It's infrastructure as a service. It'll be sustainability partners with Camstrup and ResourceWise, talking about water meters. Weird. Finance workshop is on the 15th of January at 4 p.m. And both of those will be here at the Memorial Building. Check your emails. I'm sending out more and more information through email. I think it's just a good way to get stuff out to you guys. And it's all just, it'll just be straight information. If there's any questions, it'll be one-on-one direct. And then we got the iPads in, we're waiting on cases. So next meeting, we're going to start in on using that. I will, after the presentation on the procurement, I'll look for consultants. I'm going to have to find out where they start. And it is my recommendation that if we don't know which way we want to go with a management RFP, with a sale or anything like that, that we, as I know for us as city employees, we stop talking to EPCOR for fear that the RFP process is very specific. EPCOR already has a head start. If there was a management contract and an RFP that went out, they could, and EPCOR gets chosen, and the people were not given the same latitude that EPCOR has been, that they could file a lawsuit against us for favoritism. So if we choose to go to a management RFP, any bid or offer that comes out would have to have the same amount of time that EPCOR has had, and they have to have the same exact things that EPCOR has done. So before we could even accept any bids. So that's just that's just a small portion of the RFP process. So until we figure that out, as a city, everything will go through me and I will choose whether to answer or not. It's my recommendation that council does the same.
And that's just for the sale, because
That's not, so if you wanted, if a private sale, we're not doing anything wrong. If this is if we go to an RFP and we go to a management style, or we RFP for bids for the sale, then we're walking a fine line right now on, and we can have a pre-proposal conference, and then all the information that EPCOR has can be given to potential bidders, and we should be good. But we don't want to keep running that tally up, in my opinion. We open ourselves up for a potential lawsuit if there's more than one bidder. That's all I got.
That's all you
one-
got?
One question back to your very first one on the legislative thing is,
Yes.
can you let me know on the deadline on that? Cause I don't know what I've got coming up. It's the February one you mentioned.
Yes, I think the deadline for all of us for sign up is the 25th of January.
Yeah, I won't know by then, so I'll have to.
Okay. I'll let you know if that date is different. I know it's at the end of this month,
I just
though.
know I don't have that appointment till the 30th to know when my next.
Okay,
Just including.
you're going.
Can I ask on for the, I think it's a Wednesday, might even be Monday, for the infrastructure
Yes.
workshop. Do you have any literature that they've sent you or presentations that you can send to us early?
I can,
Please.
and I will. And then you'll have paper copies that I'll bring to it.
Perfect.
So has it been posted that we could potentially have a problem?
Yeah.
We'll be posting that this week for both of those next week. We're taking it 1 week at a time. We have a lot of things that people are going to.
Okay. That's all?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, for now, until
Okay. Mr. Elkins,
None.
Mr. Lopez,
No.
Mr. Sell,
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Robbins.
Yeah, I guess this is the last meeting we have for Martin Luther King. We don't have another meeting, do
Yeah,
we? We do.
yeah, we'll have a meeting.
no,
23rd, I think.
no,
No.
21st is the next meeting, so Martin Luther King Day will be prior.
Yeah, that's right. This is the last meeting.
Okay, then I'd like to announce then, this year, the university, the city of Portales School District going to have a community service, a day of service rather than a normal traditional kind of project. Chris has provided the university with some projects that they're going to look at. The students out there are going to work on maybe parks. I don't know what projects they're going to select, but our sort of celebration this year will be based on community service. And it'll be the community service will become staff will come from the university. So that's our program this year.
Okay. Appreciate your work on that, Mr. Robinson, and your Cultural Affairs Committee. Thank you. Mr. Rattler. Nothing, sir. Ms. Parker.
No, thank you.
Mr. Merrick.
I know it's gonna be a shock to everybody, but I don't have anything. Chris stole all my thunder.
Sorry.
A couple of those were gonna be yours, maybe, as the outgoing president, but way to go, Chris.
Sorry.
All right, Ms. Cordova.
Just two quick things. Tomorrow we do have finance committee at 8 o'clock, so I won't be for legislative, but I'll be at
10:30.
till 10:30. Okay, so then maybe I can make it. Road race tomorrow too. And then public safety on Thursday, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to make everybody aware of those two meetings and then just thank everybody for your hard work that you all have been doing and everything that you do to get our packets and everything together for us and the emails. They've been great. So thank you all. That's it.
Only thing I'm gonna say is I attended a meeting with the command staff at Cannon on Friday to discuss some of their legislative issues, and a couple of those, I'll just tell you that this council has already did resolutions on with regard to the licensure compact, which is a very important piece. And forget what the other one was, but that this council's already taken action, and the commander wanted to send down his appreciation as we move forward in the session starting on the 22nd. So with that, we stand adjourned.